What's up, Domino community, and today I'm going to share my entire thought process as I built Peach's castle from Mario in thousands of dominoes. Now with this structure, I actually didn't plan the wall. I kind of wanted to do it all by hand because honestly it's a lot more fun to build that way, and I like looking at pictures and just kind of recreating it based on the proportions and the colors. The problem was there are so many different versions of Peach's castle online, so I had to sort of take all of them and combine them into one distinct image. Now the first thing I did was center the door in the middle of the white wall, and from there I sort of just eyeballed how big different things were, like the windows, the doors, the steeples, the pictures. I had to really do a lot of thinking, like how big is this in comparison to another part of the castle. But eventually I landed on making the windows not actually part of the wall, but just by adding these light blue dominoes inside of the gaps in the wall. Now looking at the shape of the castle, I really wanted to find a way to make the towers circular. So I decided to build those two on the sides separately so that I can make it a rounded edge rather than a flat surface. And because it's rounded, I ended up using the column technique because it's a little easier to connect all of the dominoes, and that's why it looks a little bit different from the main part of the castle. I was also really curious to see if I could make these smaller towers come out from the castle and sort of be free floating in midair. So I experimented with putting dominoes inside the wall so they were kind of hanging off, and adding more dominoes on top of that to hold it in place. This was really sketchy, by the way, because I'm basically like doing surgery on the wall and like putting the dominoes inside already built dominoes with zero clearance. Like it needs to fit exactly, and if I bump it, the entire thing could topple over. But luckily, through a lot of concentration, I was able to actually have a curve come out from the wall. And honestly, if I had planned this wall entirely in advance, I would not have thought of something like this. So I really do appreciate sometimes when you do just go for it without any plan. I find that when I build something without a plan, I'm a lot more experimental and I try a lot more new things. And I think that's a really helpful part of my process, even if it does take a little bit longer. So I'm actually a little bit concerned about this wall here. It's kind of leaning, I don't know if you can see this, it's like leaning back, but also there's like extra weight on the front, which is gonna weigh it down even more, and the floor isn't like completely flat, and it needs to be like a lot taller. So sometimes when I'm building from one angle, I tend to put the dominoes a little bit closer to myself, and over time, as we build it higher, it'll just end up leaning ever so slightly. And when you're building a structure that's this tall, that can be incredibly risky. Next, it was time to make the stained glass window of Peach. And this is way too complex to put in an actual domino wall, so I decided to print it out and tape it to a couple of dominoes so that I could just place it on top of the wall. Whoops. And this worked out really nicely. Slowly but surely, I built the castle even taller, and then wow, so I just had a huge fail. The entire castle fell over. I was just placing dominoes and suddenly I saw the wall very slowly just shifting towards me, and then in the blink of an eye, it all just crashed down. It was just leaning way too much, and the added weight from the castles coming out just like kind of imbalanced it. It was a really good test run, but I gotta admit, it was pretty unfortunate to see a week of work just crumble before my eyes. At this point, I was really behind in this project, but I wanted to try it again. Now that I had an idea of how to build it, the second time around was a lot faster. And for this time, I improved quite a few things with the design and my building technique. For one, I started building the wall sideways so that I could always keep an eye on if the dominoes were straight or leaning forward or too much back. By looking at the wall sideways, you can really easily see if something is out of place and easily correct that. Another thing I improved, I made the door a little bit bigger, and I think that looks a lot nicer than the smaller doors in the previous attempt. Another thing I did to prevent it from falling over is by adding small pieces of cardstock underneath dominoes in the floating tower. In the first attempt, they were really sloping down. By adding thin strips of paper every couple of dominoes, you can make it realign so it's perfectly straight. I even improved the colors of the roof by making the smaller steeples a slightly different shade of pink. I think that'll allow you to see the steeples a little more clearly so they don't kind of get mixed up with the other ones. And the ones that are smaller are closer to the viewer, so those are a little bit lighter compared to the ones in the back, which are slightly darker. This time around was a lot smoother, and especially looking at it sideways, I could tell it was a lot more stable. I was really happy with how it was coming out. It was a lot of trial and error to figure out how big each part of the castle should be, but I had a really good time with it. I also noticed that in the games, the towers on the side aren't fully cylindrical, like they kind of go in towards the bottom. So in this new design, I added a couple of dominoes on the sides so it can look like it's kind of tapering off and floating in midair. And eventually I got to the top of the castle and it was super tall. Now at this point, it was time to make the trigger to topple it. But because there wasn't a lot of room behind the castle, I had to use a pulley system by adding a connects piece and taping that to the wall with some super strong tape and having the string go through that. The string really needs to be pulled exactly perpendicular to the wall for the best angle for these dominoes to come out. So that's why I used a pulley system. Now the tricky part with setting up the trigger is getting the string length right. You want to make sure that the string has enough slack that it can still tip over and have some momentum to pull the string without getting stopped. Yet at the same time, you don't want too much slack that when the domino falls over, it's not going to pull the domino with it because the string is too long. And as I was testing the length of the string and the distance that the domino should be from the castle, I pulled the trigger a bit too hard. That is incredibly unfortunate. I fell again, and this is a little more heartbreaking because I was so close to finishing, and at this point, I'm like a week and a half behind now. I don't even know if I should rebuild it, is it worth it? It's very sad. It's been a while since I've had a pretty large fail multiple times, so I took a little bit of a break. As I was working at my desk, this might be really cheesy, but I saw the keep on building sign on my desk, and something in that moment just clicked in me. I need to finish this castle. I need to keep on building. I need to redo it. I can't stop here. So even though I was a week and a half behind on this project, I decided to pick up the dominoes again and try one last time. And with this attempt, I was able to improve even more things with the design. I also improved the placement of the windows so you can see them a little bit better and they're not blocked by any of the steeples. The third time around was speedy quick. After building it twice, I knew exactly what I needed to do, so I was just listening to podcasts and music and just building away again. So as I finished the main part of the castle, it was time to set up the trigger again. This is the third attempt. I'm about to make the trigger again, and I've modified it so it's going to topple from this ledge, and the big domino is going to fall and pull the string on this pulley and then knock down the pink domino. By having this big domino fall a greater distance, that means I can have a lot more slack in the string to pull, and I won't have to be so up close to the point where it's almost about to tip over. I even added a little safety by taping the string to the wall in case I did accidentally drop the big domino. I think this is going to be a lot safer. I feel a lot better, but still very scared. Somehow it worked, and to my delight, the trigger was finally successfully set up. I did it! I was so happy. That is the hardest part. Now all that's left is making the towers around it, and it is good to go. Another thing I improved was the connection points from the main castle to the two towers on the other side. So the roof of the side towers are held up by part of the main castle, so if the middle of the castle falls, the towers on the outside will also fall. This will make it a lot easier to trigger because then it only needs to topple from the middle instead of at 3 different points. Setting up the towers on the side was a breeze, and finally, and I mean finally, I successfully completed Peach's castle. I think there's a lot to learn from this experience. I kind of like to think that maybe these failures were supposed to happen. Every time I rebuilt it, I learned so much. I was able to improve the design in so many more ways and improve my building technique. So just know that even if you fail in your own domino projects, you are not alone. It happens to all of us. I'm gonna topple this thing as soon as I finish the entire setup. The full fall down will be up next Saturday on April 8th. so stay tuned for that. Also, I'm trying to get Nintendo and Illumination to see the final video, so when it comes out, it would mean so much if you were able to send it to them or just share it with any of your friends who are Mario fans. It would mean so much to me. But thank you for sticking around watching my thought process. This was quite a build, and I'm just really happy that it's finally done now. Also, don't forget, you can save 10% off all of my merch by tomorrow night, so definitely go to heavish5.com/store to get that now. I want to give a shout out to our featured community member, Domino Club Vietnam, who left this really kind comment on my video. I always love highlighting comments like these. And as always, I'm Lily Heavish, and keep on building.